I got your. Hey there, Stephen Oliver again. I'm here with Dan Cuprill. Dan, I was rounding up your books that I have in my possession here, and I don't know how many of you co-authored now.
I've never counted it.
Yeah.
Probably 50,
Okay.
maybe more. Yeah, I never really thought about it.
Well, I don't have all 50, but I know I have 5 or 10. I ended up everything that was on Amazon, and I've got these here as well.
Right.
And let's go through your background. You have been I see we share a common malady of having a more bad answers degree, which I don't know if it's been very useful in my entrepreneurial endeavors over the years. Although I will say, when I did my MBA, the director of the program was a quite entrepreneurial guy. He had run he had done a lot of venture capital stuff, and a high level marketing guy. But most of the other professors couldn't run a business to save their life, if you know what I mean.
No, but for me, I did it because I was a journalism undergrad. And so about halfway through college, decided that's not what I wanted to do, but I was too far along. If I had changed majors, it would have taken me longer to graduate. So,
Sure.
so I got a job in corporate America out of college, the only offer I had. And so my goal was to learn business that I didn't have, so that I would have the confidence at the very least to do something on my own. I didn't know what that was going to be at the time, but so that's why I did. So for me, it was very practical. Now, if I was a business undergrad, I don't think I would have done it.
Yeah.
But for somebody like me who was a journalism undergrad, no, it was quite helpful.
Yeah, my trajectory was I went to Georgetown University, got a degree in economics, thinking I was going to go Harvard, Wharton, or Stanford for an MBA, and end up at Wall Street. And at the end of 4 years after working full time, while I was going to school, I decided I didn't want to keep going in school. And instead of ending up in Wall Street, I ended up in Denver and opened 6 martial arts schools. So, talk about a divergent. But it was how I worked my way through college was running a martial arts school, and I actually interviewed with all the big firms in Wall Street at the time, and I was making about double what they were offering. I mean, that obviously there's a big upside potential there on some of those deals, but I just couldn't see moving from Washington D.C. to Manhattan for a 50% pay cut after making double running a martial arts school. So it was a strange career divergence, but. You've been a financial advisor now for, I mean, we're both aging ourselves, but for quite a while. How many years have you been in the business?
Yeah, it's a little over 25. I think I was
Okay.
32, 33 when I left Chubb and started the firm. So so yeah, it's been about that long.
So a long time. And your business has been based in Ohio, but now you were splitting your time between there and Nashville area. Is that right?
Right. Well, one of the things I feel strongly about is no matter what kind of business you're in, you ought to run it in a way that eventually you can become non-essential.
Right.
And I mean, to me, that's the ultimate definition of entrepreneur, is if you move yourself and it still runs. So about 5 years ago, I kind of put that belief to the test and bought a place here, and I still have an apartment in Cincinnati, so I still go back and forth. But I actually like the dichotomy of living between the two places. It's fine for me. But if I wanted to never show up in Cincinnati again, I could do that. Now for a long time there, I had a partner who was kind of running the planning firm.
Mm-hmm.
She left not quite a year ago, so I'm in that transitionary step now of having her replaced and working it that way. So I'm a little bit more involved now than I had planned to be at this point, but it's more than manageable.
Yeah, yeah, and I understand the mindset. When I moved to Denver, I was immediately modeling where I had been working in Washington, and they had 13 locations, and I was modeling somebody who was running 13 independent retail businesses plus a protective equipment company plus a couple of other companies, and that was the only model in my head. Was I've got to go hire, in our terminology, a program director and an instructor, so somebody to do marketing and sales, somebody to do the front end fulfillment, and both of them focused on client service.
Right.
And I had a heck of a good model because I ended up with 2,500 students in about 18 months, opened 5 locations, then 6 locations in 30 months. And, in retrospect, I would not have done it that way. I've had a few people come out of my organization and go try to replicate what I did. And I keep saying, well, you should have asked me first. It was quite a process. We talk about the MBA. I was taking the finance class in the MBA, and the professor was talking about the amount of capitalization you need for certain size businesses and so forth. And I said, well, in today's terms, it was about $3-4 million a year business. But I said, well, how about a $2 million business on $10,000? He goes, no, that's impossible. I said, no, it's just very stressful. It's not impossible. I did it, but fun stuff. So on your financial business, tell everybody who you focus on and how you've gone about building it. And I'll let you give whatever numbers you're comfortable with, but you've built a very successful practice there in Cincinnati. So let's share a little bit more about that for everyone.
Well, the firm has a couple of different targets, if you will. One would be physicians, and strangely, this may sound, Filipino physicians.
Okay.
Because during the 1970s, during the Vietnam War, we had a doctor shortage here in the United States. And so one of the ways to alleviate that was to make it easier for foreign trained physicians to come here. I mean, now if you come here and you are a fully trained physician, and you basically have to go to medical school again.
Right.
But back then they alleviated that. And for whatever reason, a lot of them came from the Philippines. And for whatever reason, a lot of them settled in Cincinnati.
Yeah.
So that actually became kind of a niche of ours, by working with one and then working with many and having an understanding about, their culture and what they were about and what they wanted to do. Even though neither me nor my partner were Filipino. So that was one target market niche. And then the other one has been purely on message, which is rather than focus on returns, we talk more about taxes.
Right.
So the typical client who comes to us has most of their money in a tax sheltered device and has always believed, quite properly for a long time, that deferring taxation makes sense. But there's always an assumption there. And the assumption is that it makes sense because when you're retired, rates will be lower. But when you look at the aging of the baby boomer and the national debt and all that, and then you look at historically where we've had rates as high as 90% in the 40s, that's an assumption that might be a bit aggressive.
Sure.
And so what we have done is enter the conversation. Now, in truth, we don't recommend any strategy that's patented or weird or anything like that. It's just the fact that when we are conveying a message to the market, that becomes our approach.
Sure.
Prior to that, we had a lot of success with marketing the message that active management is a fool's exercise.
Right.
That if you're going to make moves on your portfolio based on what you think is going to happen, then you're really not investing, you're speculating.
Right.
And this was well before even Vanguard became a household word.
Yeah.
That message now is not nearly as effective because most people understand it and to a large extent do it. But so we've had a little bit of target marketing by occupation. We've had some by what we do and how we do it. And that's kind of where we are at this point now. Most of the Filipino physicians that we work with are retired. So where my practice is right now, frankly, is kind of at a maintenance stage. It's a rather large practice, but not with a lot of staff, very small staff. So it basically serves my needs, which is maintaining it at its current level. We did acquire a practice at the beginning of the year, and so we may grow a little bit through that. But when I look at the age of our average client, et cetera, their average life expectancy will probably coincide well with mine, and that's perfectly fine for what I want to do.
Sure. And and you've got to practice. And I'll get your opinion on this. We both work with advisors, and I go back to my martial arts roots on a lot of this stuff. Reversion to the familiar. But I see a lot of advisors who are working off front end commissions and just are living hand to mouth.
Yeah.
And they have a great month, they have a horrible month. They're either from life insurance commissions or annuity commissions.
Right.
And I always shift to what I believe is your format, where you have assets under management, you have a steady stream of revenue, you've got steady clients, and I have seen just on both sides of the business people who, do real well for a while. And of course, advisors are no better than any other business owner in managing their own money sometimes. Yeah. So, they have a great quarter and they go buy a bunch of toys, and then they have a bad quarter and they're screwed. What's your balance on that as far as focusing on where the on the product side, what's your focus with their clients?
I was very fortunate. Probably within the first year of being in practice, I saw the light and decided I was going to be, I wouldn't say fee only, but primarily fee.
Right.
So of my revenues now, 95% of it are fee, which means they're recurring. Yeah. So I get a fee from every single client every single quarter.
Right.
We also charge planning fees independently of AUM fees, so we receive that as well.
Yeah.
But I feel strongly that if you're not fee based, you're really not advising. What you're doing is you're selling product, which is fine. It's nothing wrong with being a salesperson. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, we all have to be to a certain extent, but when it is not in your best interest financially to have reviews with people because they ain't paying you, well, it's not only it's not even in their best interest, let alone your best interest. So I don't feel strongly one way or the other. I mean, I think in working with advisors, I think any advisor who's not heavily fee oriented is a fool.
Yeah.
Because they're going to go away. You're going to go away because the client does not need you for the products that you provide. They can get them online. They can they can get very competent advice online.
Right.
There has to be a higher reason why you work with somebody in order for you to survive. And that is that your personal presence minimizes anxiety in their life as it relates to money.
Right.
And so you need to only work with people where that anxiety level exists.
Yeah.
And if you do, they won't leave you.
Yeah.
Not if you do a good job.
Yeah.
If you're going to be a one who touts a product, well, yeah, you're going to go away. And right now, less than 20% of the population even uses an advisor now.
Right.
I could see that number going further down. Now, there's still going to be plenty of work for good advisors, but they're going to have to be smart in how they position themselves. And if they're going to position themselves as just generalists or product salespeople, they will be few and far in between.
Yeah, and I really got the blinding flash of this, and I immediately recognized the syndrome from my other business activities, but I was internal into Northwestern Mutual for a long time before I ever did anything else, and watching the structures there. Number one, they have this huge college recruiting program with about a 95% failure rate. Yeah, so their marketing processes and so forth that they're involving new advisors in is pretty non-existent compared to what we would think of. But then the other side of it is so much of the business is purely dependent upon the commissions up front on
and not only that, but an insurance product. So to basically call themselves advisors when in reality they would never tell somebody they shouldn't buy whole life insurance. They would never do that because it's contrary to what they were about. So to me, a true advisor is someone who meets with somebody and could potentially say to them, like a good doctor would say, is, yeah, you're in great shape. You don't need to do anything.
Right.
But when you are product driven, you are incapable of doing that.
Yeah.
And so you ultimately would make recommendations to people that you might not even make for yourself or your own mother, but you would for a stranger because you're in the business of selling a product. So I could see a time where, like in Australia, where it could be illegal to get commissions. I hope we don't. I think people should have the choice,
right,
who they work with and how they work with. But I think just the general marketplace, the advances in technology, et cetera, unlike when I came out of college and you pretty much needed an advisor to buy anything, and now you don't. So I think unless an advisor takes the time to differentiate himself, he'll probably fade away.
You bet. You bet. Hey, and just an interesting side. So your book is titled Renegade Advisor, and what a strange, I don't know if you can see a magazine cover back there, but it called me the Mile High Maverick back in 2000. Let's see, 2020. So that's 22 years old now. What's the concept behind Renegade, and in what way would you consider yourself renegade relative to the industry, suppliers?
Yeah. So, the industry and the product vendors, the suppliers, if you will, have created a myth, in my opinion, that success is defined by revenue and staff size. Mm-hmm. Because if you ever go to one of their meetings, they're all about getting the advisor to commit to spending more money to grow their operation. Now, in theory, you would think that means more profit, and it might. But what happens is that you can find yourself working forever, and never really enjoying the fruits of all that labor that you have. Mm-hmm. I have seen people's marriages get destroyed by pursuing certain volume goals, not even knowing who their kids are, and not even having that much money themselves. Sure. Because they kind of bought into this myth that every dollar of profit should be reinvested back into the business. Yeah. And what they never did was what we recommend our clients do, which is take part of your savings every year and invest it for yourself. Right. The vendors are never going to use that message. Vendors will always tell you more is better because it's in their best interest. Sure. They're in the product sales business. Right. And my approach is to say, and I'd say this to any business owner, let's first accept the logical reality that when you sell your business, you aren't going to get a lot of buyers. You may not get that much for it. Now, if I'm wrong, great. Mm-hmm. But let's just assume you get nothing for it other than maybe 20 cents on the dollar for your furniture. Right. That means you have to be smart and invest your profits. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, to a financial advisor, why not aspire to become your largest client? Sure. When you go to a lot of these meetings, they will tell the advisors when they're pitching, you should try this marketing wise and that marketing wise. They literally will say to them, well, if you don't have the money, borrow it or pull it out of your IRA because this will have a higher return than your equities. Mm-hmm. Stuff that you just, to me, it would almost be akin to a doctor talking about the benefits of amphetamines. They took them in medical school, but they weren't good for them. And so this is what happens. And as a result, you meet a lot of what I call broke advisors. Sure. These are people who, on paper, they generate a lot of revenue, but between the sizes of their staff and their inefficiencies, they're really not making that much money. Yeah. And whereas the vendors will tell you that a 30 or 35% profit margin is what you should strive for, I think it's garbage. I think you should have a 60 or 65% profit margin. I mean, I've been able to do it. Yeah. I can do it. Anybody can do it. And the reason they've gotten away with this is because most financial advisors that I know did not become advisors because they had this love for personal finance. Mm-hmm. They became advisors because they enjoyed selling and the margins are good. You get paid well. Sure. And so that became their entree, but they were never really trained business people. Mm-hmm. And so now they're running these sales offices where they don't have a budget. They don't have any real cash flow discipline. Yeah. A lot of them have massive amounts of debt, which is kind of like a dentist with bad teeth. You bet. And so there's just a high level of dysfunctionality. And so having witnessed the advice of the product vendors for years and sitting there and just shaking my head, I started getting approached by a lot of other advisors on how I do things because I do things very differently than they do. Sure. I think the biggest thing that stuck out to most was the fact that I had this large practice and a very small staff. Right. And they're like, how do you do that? And I said, well, first of all, I guarantee you have a staff that large, they're not all doing full-time work. No, okay? No. The reason you have a staff that large is because you allowed your business, you bought into this myth that you should constantly be investing more and more money into your business, which is really spending money. Unless you're publicly traded, you're not investing.
Yeah.
So you've been spending this money and you never really took inventory on what your people do. And my approach has always been, give me one really, really good person and I will pay her more than she could make somewhere else. And she'd rather pay her more and she'll do more work than bring in a second person. And again, if you're very smart and system oriented in how you run your office, it's just a regular job. So when people start seeking me out, that's when I realized, okay, look, there's something here that I can help others with. And that's when Advisor Architect got launched. And that's when I started showing people those 11 systems.
You bet. It's amazing. And almost anybody in any niche thinks, but their business is different, their situation is different, their city is different. Right. I mentioned like 2020. I have one of my books on the back shelf there is called Everything I Wished I Knew When I Was 22. There's a chapter in it called Bigger Isn't Always Better. And you pretty much could have transcribed what you just said and trade financial advisor for martial arts school, and it said exactly the same thing. And I'll add one more thing to that staffing. If you have two staff members, they're both constantly whining about how overworked they are, so now they want a third staff member, which means that they each do 2/3 of the work that they were doing before. And then if you have three, they're whining about how busy they are. So if you hire the fourth staff member, they're all doing half of what they were doing before. And it's just this ongoing. A term I stole from Steve Jobs years ago is it's interestingly reflected in what's going on with Twitter right now. But if you recall, when Jobs came back into Apple, he fired just 2/3 of the staff, something like that. And when they asked about it, he said, well, all growth companies tend to go through a bozo explosion. He goes, all of a sudden, you let people hire B players, the B players hire C players. And he said, really, my biggest secret in turning around Apple is figure out who the A players were that hadn't quit yet because it was such a depressing environment, and get rid of everybody else, and then everything was just fine. And that goes back again, whatever it's been since he took back over and turned it around. But I adopted that term, bozo explosion, because it's just what happens in almost any business. I'm dealing with a very high volume advisor right now, 250 million assets under management, heavy commissions, and he's got 4 staff members, none of whom are doing much.
Yeah. And the thing too with the commission model is, in some ways, the commission model will justify slightly higher staff only because it's much more transactional.
Right.
There's so many more applications coming through and all that, because if there's not, you go under.
Yeah.
So whereas if you have the fee-based model, you can literally do what I did, which was essentially say we're closed to new clients.
Yeah.
Now, again, there's some that would say that's nuts, that if you do that, your business is dying. And the way I looked at it, as long as it didn't die before I died, then I'm okay with that. Now, that's not the type of thought process that a product vendor is ever going to encourage.
No, not at all.
Best interest, right?
Oh, yeah.
But it's perfectly okay for you to have that mentality to say, you know what, I've got enough clients now.
Yeah.
I'm going to dedicate my time to getting them what they need, because they pay me every quarter, every month.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the time is going to be spent with me. And I'm going to be enjoying the freedom that I thought I was going to get when I decided to become self-employed. I mean, Lord knows you took on a whole bunch of other bad things. You might as well get the good thing.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if you find yourself, that you're not making anything more than your next door neighbor who lives in a house like yours, but because he works for a corporation, he's got this great staff and benefits and vacation, all the stuff you don't have.
Oh, yeah.
You got to be getting something in return, right? And too often they're not.
No.
So they just trade one bad job for another. Only this bad job, they own it, and their boss is now their clients.
Well, the interesting corollary is I've worked in the franchise industry for years, and it's amazing that people will pay $150,000 to go from a corporate job to be self-employed, double the number of hours, and cut their pay. And that's just what happens with over and over and over.
Well, which is okay as long as you understand that's a temporary step back.
Yeah.
But what you have to be very proactive to get to that crossing point.
Yeah.
where you're now getting more than you would have made. You know, it's funny you bring that up because on occasion I will run into somebody that I worked with back when I worked for Chubb for 10 years. And most have left, but if not, they stay in the industry. But even those who haven't, it blows my mind. I remember those first 10 years of being on my own, thinking I would be making a lot more had I stayed.
Mhm.
But now my life is light years different than theirs. And it's not just the money aspect to it.
Yeah.
It's, I mean, that's part of it, but really the part of it is, the freedom,
Yeah.
never to have to go to a meeting again,
Yeah.
or never have to answer to anybody. I didn't want to, not having a boss. I mean, what a
Right.
great freedom
Yeah.
that is.
Yeah. Commute,
So
clock in, clock out.
yeah. So if you're going to start something, but you're not going to chart when I'm going to cross that point to where the sacrifice ends and the benefits occur, then you're kind of spinning your wheels. And I don't think that's why anybody went into business. I think we all went into business because we kind of wanted the freedom that we thought business owners have. And some do.
You bet.
But too often don't, because they don't make themselves irrelevant within their business.
Yeah. You mentioned something else, and I'll circle back to it. You mentioned the initial planning fee or ongoing planning fee.
Mhm.
Strangely, that seems to be controversial among advisors too. They're afraid to charge a fee. They're afraid to charge money. Yeah,
it's fear is what it is.
Yeah,
because they forget that the ideal customer, the ideal client, is not coming to them to buy a product. The ideal client wants good advice.
Yeah.
And the ideal client expects to pay for advice.
Yeah.
But advisors think that if I offer this person, say I do a plan for a fee and they say no, now I don't get to give them my dog and pony show.
Yeah.
So in other words, if they don't pay, if I don't charge them the $2,500, or they don't want to pay the $2,500, they'll still want to pay me $10,000 a year. No, it makes absolutely no sense.
Yeah.
The problem there is that, and this is all business owners, we have a scarcity mentality about where our next client is. And so what do? We race to the bottom as it relates to price.
Right.
And so you take the one thing that distinguishes you from all other advisors, your expertise, and you give it away for free. Whereas instead, if you took the time when the prospect comes in to understand why they might hire you and why they might not, then you will only make the offer for your services to those will hire you.
Oh, yeah.
And you won't even offer your services to the ones you're pretty comfortable with, or you don't even want them to.
Sure.
Which actually will make you even more attractive to them, because now you're coming across as anything but needy, which is a very attractive thing, to not be needy.
Absolutely.
Whereas needy is probably the most unattractive attribute, particularly of anybody who's trying to sell something. So I will say this, that little piece of advice, without a question, is the one thing that people come back to me later and go, man, thank you so much for getting me to do that. I can almost kick myself for not having done it for however many years they were in business. It was so easy. It's never been an issue. And I'm like, yeah, no problem. If I can do it, you can do it. But to me, that's the one thing I have that no other advisor can have, is me and my thought process, how I think about things. And I'm going to charge for that. And if you get ahead and let's say you charge somebody $3,000 to do an initial analysis and they move $10 million to you, if you don't want to bill them for the plan, don't bill them.
Yeah.
But don't go into the relationship with the idea that you're going to do quote unquote free analysis.
No.
Because they're going to see it for what it is. But if you're going to put your client's best interest first, you owe it to them to act, like I said before, of being willing to say to them, you know what? You don't need my help. You've got everything in place. And then the only way you can do that really and stay in business is to charge to say that.
Yeah.
So do it.
Well, and all the data, anywhere you look, that great book by Robert Cialdini, Influence, Science, and Practice, all of it verifies that that's exactly right. Once somebody has paid you $2,500 or $5,000 or whatever the planning fee might be, they're way more likely. I mean, the odds of them,
because they already view you as an advisor.
Yeah.
See, until you actually get a check from them, you're still pushing a product on them.
Yeah.
As soon as someone says, okay, that sounds great, I don't know what I'm going to recommend to them.
Yeah.
But now that they know that we have this relationship, now when I sit down with them and I show them the direction they're headed, and then they ask them, is that optimal? And if they tell me no, then I show them another approach they're like, well, of course they're going to implement with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Plus, they're more likely to view it as objective.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Without a doubt, because they paid for it.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So
There's absolutely no downside other than, as you said,
it's your own, it's your own fear that's holding you back.
Yeah.
And you know what? We all have self-limiting beliefs, from dating to the people we associate with to the people that we think we're worthy to have as clients. What we have to do is just work on that, work on our mindset so that we have that, even if we have to fake the confidence early on, once you have enough success, you'll be naturally confident.
Yeah.
And I gotta tell you, there's nothing more rewarding, in my opinion, than having a prospect sit across from me who thinks they're really impressive and desirable. And for me, because of reasons they've given me, tell them, I don't think you need my help, or even better, I'm not the right advisor for you.
Right. Right.
That is incredibly empowering to do that. Because in the past, what would happen is you invariably take on people that you really don't want to take on. They're not nice. They're going to misuse you, whatever the case may be. And you suffer for it. And you think, well, I got to do it because the guy pays him a lot of money. No, you don't have to do it. No one ever pays you that much that's worth suffering. So when you have adopted this approach that says, I only offer my services to people that I feel are ideal, and ideal can mean a lot of things. It is incredibly rewarding when you tell that one person, no, thank you. I appreciate you coming by, but we're not the right fit for you. And then their jaw drops as they go walking out of the
buried in there's probably three principles that should be pulled out even more. One is people respond much better to any form of takeaway selling than they do you trying to talk them into anything.
Without a doubt.
The second is really positioning yourself in that expert role. And it makes you very, very attractive. Anything that we've ever done, we always position it as a qualification process. And I always look at it like, before their standards changed, the process of being accepted into Harvard or to West Point or to Stanford is, I always wanted to feel that way. Here's the hoops you have to jump through in order to work with me. I'm relatively inaccessible. I only work by appointment, only accessible by appointment. All of those things all work in your favor on positioning yourself as an expert. But there's nothing that makes, and by the way, the higher up the prospect is on the attractiveness hierarchy for us, from a standpoint of their income, their wealth, their attractiveness as a client, the more effective it is, not as a technique, but as they only want to work with the best. They don't and I see this in all of the other businesses I've been involved with, is it's not about price. I don't care whether you're putting your 7-year-old into karate lessons or you're finding somebody to invest your life savings with. People want the best possible person to work with.
Yeah.
And then if money's an issue, they figure out if they can work it into the budget. They don't, they're not out shopping, this guy's this much and this guy's this much and this guy's this much and this gal's this much. That's just not the way their decision process works. Right. And I think we missed that point, that they're looking for the best. They're not looking for the cheapest.
I think one thing that can help is and this would be for anybody in business, if you yourself were a part of your target market, what would you value? How would you want the experience? So that's kind of the way I look at it.
Right.
At my age now and my net worth now, I probably would meet the ideal definition for this is who most financial advisors would want. Okay. So that's a useful thing for me, because I can almost go with my own intuition about how the client's going to perceive this, because that's how I perceive it. And I kind of fall into that group. Now, when I was in my 30s, so I wasn't even near the age of the people I was trying to attract, nor did I have the net worth. I had to do some more fact finding. And it's very easy for you to just draw your own conclusions about what your market wants without doing the work. And you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, the only thing, again, is I don't want to reiterate too much, but it is really the point. All the changes that we know we should do, but we don't do, is just largely because we're fearful. And it's kind of funny in a way, because I'm like, well, if what you were doing now wasn't working all that great, why are you being afraid? Right. Why not just do it? And of course, the most powerful thing you can do is find somebody who's getting the results you're getting and do it the same way.
You bet.
Because I always say there are no gurus in this world. They're just people that, we've all learned from somebody else. I don't have an original thought in my head.
Mhm.
If I have any genius, it's just my willingness to implement. That's it.
You
But
bet.
anybody, okay. But there isn't a single thing that I know that I came up with on my own. No, I learned it from somebody. And even if I think I came up with my own, I'm sure I didn't. It just got stuck in my subconscious somewhere, and I came about, and I didn't realize where I got it from.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that of course is the key issue, I think, is if you have more client flow than you can deal with,
Yeah.
then you can emotionally feel much more confident behaving this way, where you're and again, I don't know how many people I've told now is, what happened if you just fired the bottom third? Wouldn't you be happier and make more money? Right.
Yeah.
And by the way, you took 10 new people this month and you took 4 that you knew you didn't want to work with.
Having a good marketing system will help your sales system.
Yes.
But don't let the two of them get mixed up. So what I mean by that is, when someone tells me that they've got to take on somebody they don't like because they don't have enough people in the pipeline, well, then you have a marketing problem.
Oh, sure.
Okay?
Yeah.
But don't confound that with a good selling approach, which is to never take somebody that's not a fit. Right?
Yeah.
So you have to look at it that way. But I also think that if you adopt this profit approach that I recommend, you'll understand that if I lose a client today, it's very easy for me to offset their revenue through the profitable management of my practice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that could be very easy. That could be something nothing more than pushing back some expense another quarter,
Mm-hmm.
canceling a product or service that I don't use, but I pay for. So it's such an easier goal to hit. And then if that profit goal then gets translated into, okay, of that profit, here's how much I'm going to invest in my portfolio.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just becomes so much easier to also then not chase clients that you shouldn't be chasing anyway.
Yeah.
If I can say, well, I don't need you. I got what I personally need. Mm-hmm. So there's nothing that you're going to bring to the table. Now, again, I'm not encouraging people to be anti-growth, and I'm not encouraging them to be rude to prospects.
No.
I'm just simply saying you ought to have an idea what your end game is here. Mm-hmm. Don't just go in every day trying to make as many sales you possibly can, because there will be a price to be paid, and usually it'll come in the issue of time. Mm-hmm. We don't have to go far to find very successful people in business who had awful, awful family lives.
Oh yeah.
And I don't know, to me, I just didn't want that. So, I only have one child. It's pretty easy, but still, I wanted to be there for everything.
Yeah.
And so to me, that was the balance. My vendors wouldn't define success that way. They're like, you're 40 back then, 40 something years old, and you're in coast mode. And I'm like, yeah, thank God I am. Mm-hmm. But they didn't want to view it that way. They were always like, well, how much more are you going to do this year? None.
It is funny. My daughter's 21. She'll be graduating from college this year. And that was a real inflection point for my business structure. And I'm sure it is for many people, but I went through everything and said, what am I doing that's giving me stress? What am I doing that's chewing up my time? What am I doing that's going to keep me from the elementary things, from soccer, from all of the thing? And I completely just, I imploded a bunch of stuff just intentionally, because it's like, well, this is now not, I don't want to be at 7:00 at night worrying about 22 staff problems rather than at her soccer game. Right. And whatever it takes. But sometimes people have built, I always like Steve Cuppy's saying is, be careful of building, climbing the ladder of success and ending up finding out it's on the wrong wall. Right. Yeah. And that's exactly what we're talking about.
But that should be a real motivation though for advisors to go fee-based, because I understood that I was going to have to be on this new business treadmill for a while. Mm-hmm. I just didn't want to be on it forever. Right. And the fact that I was able to get to a point where I was okay coasting was fine. Mm-hmm. And there were times I said, I'm going to coast for this year, and then I'm going to pick it up the year after that. Got to be a little careful. Clients do die. They do leave you. Things do happen. Markets do go down. Sure. But as long as you are building this base, adding to your own personal net worth, your own portfolio, doing the things you tell your clients to do.
Yeah.
As you get older and older, you'll be able to have less stress upon yourself as to why you need this particular client.
You bet. You bet. From a standpoint of early on, when you were really building the client base, what were some of your key marketing strategies? You mentioned two specific niches.
Yeah.
An interesting one I would never have thought about is,
yeah. Well, if you
filling
would have
people out.
dropped me off in a city where I didn't know anybody, the thing that has always worked best for me was to do, for a fee, a 2 or 3 week workshop.
Okay.
So we were doing direct mail. I was using an outside system.
Mhm.
And we would drop 10,000 pieces of direct mail. People pay $49 to come, and they meet with me in a classroom with everybody else. We would, in the good old days, you could really fill up the room. Now it's not nearly as attractive, but it worked very well. And it was very effective for my way of selling, because I was never going to be the kind of person who could cold call over the phone. It's just not me.
Yeah.
But I can teach. And so if I can give a presentation to people over 9 hours and then at the end offer a consultation, that was perfect.
Yeah.
And that still works today.
Sure.
It doesn't necessarily work by the same numbers that it did, because there's more people out there doing it.
Yeah.
But I strongly recommend that approach, as opposed to well, we'll give you a free dinner.
Yeah.
And let me tell you about the virtues of a fixed indexed annuity. No.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You're going to be much better off. You talked about creating hurdles.
Mm-hmm.
Well, when you're feeding them, you ain't creating a hurdle. Heck, you're digging a hole, basically.
Oh yeah. No, yeah.
Literally, figuratively. So instead, if you said, no, I have this this workshop, I don't sell at the workshop. You're going to pay money to come. Yeah, you're going to get some materials, but you're going to get a lot of my time. But I can't talk about your situation specifically, not in a group setting. So when the workshop is over, if you do want to have a meeting with me, I will tell you, I offer these meetings to people who don't have advisors, who are looking to hire one. So you're very upfront. It's a very easy transition, and it has worked for me for all these years that I've done it, and has allowed me to stop doing it because I didn't need to do it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
That would be the thing. But the other thing I would throw in there is, once you start doing that, now you're kind of building you're building a list.
Mm-hmm.
And there's going to be plenty of people who will come to those workshops who, for whatever reason, won't meet with you, won't hire you. Maybe they'll meet with you, but don't hire you. And where so many advisors make a mistake is they lose touch with those people.
Oh yeah.
There's no type of recurring nurturing or marketing or anything like that. And from my experience, there's about 30%, whatever I got right away, there's about another 30% of that available. It may come 5 years from now.
Yeah.
But there's nothing better than being on a vacation, and then you see your email and someone says, yeah, I was at your workshop 4 years ago. The timing wasn't right, but now it is. I'd like to come in.
Yeah.
And the only reason that happened was because they received communication from us every single day.
Yeah. Yeah. Not to cut you off, but I actually did a poll of my clients just I think it was in November, and asked them that question. I mean, it was, how long had you been paying attention to what I'm doing before you ever got around to getting in the pipeline? And we had 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 9 years, and then I have a new one that just came back, and I think it's 12 years later.
Sure.
So it's people think that it's either a yes or no immediately. If I don't get them this week or in the next couple of weeks, I'm not going to get them.
Yeah.
But I think
some people that is the case, but there's a lot of other people in your list where that's not the case.
Yeah.
And they want to get to that. The other thing too is, if you have approaches to build lists. So for example, like I use what we call a shock and awe kit, and I'm not really marketing me as much as I'm marketing the tax-free retirement toolkit. Mm-hmm. And so people order the tax-free retirement toolkit, they get it, we nurture them, and then we invite them to a workshop. Right. It's kind of cool when they actually show up at the workshap with the box themselves.
Sure. Oh yeah, in tow.
But what I've done there is I have made them, I have gotten them to identify themselves as someone who's interested in what I do, to the point where they're willing to give me their name and address and telephone number. Mm-hmm. And so now I'm creating my own list that not only has demographical uses, but actually has a lot of psychological issues, graphics to it, because I know that person worries about taxes.
Right.
Or I know they worry about this as it relates to money. They don't have enough.
Yeah.
And that's something you can't get from any list vendor.
No.
So if you took the time to sector out part of your marketing budget and you focused it on list building, it's not going to necessarily hit home runs overnight, but it does hit home runs over time, and you won't have
Right.
to buy lists anymore. You'll have your own list.
You bet. And then to nurture it, I mean, long before we met personally, I had been listening to your podcast for quite a while, and I know you do a client or a prospect podcast. You do a podcast for financial advisors. That's
Right.
the one I had been going through, and
Right.
I had actually gone through a spate of listening to everybody's, and as you know, 9 out of 10 are dry as hell, and it's just painful to go through. But it's such a wonderful way to nurture what feels like a personal relationship from afar. And long before we ever met, I knew about your son, and you call him the clone, and I knew about the dog, and I knew about Tennessee and Ohio, and I could probably keep rattling off the list, fishing expeditions,
which was all intentional, because I wanted you to think you knew me as a person.
Exactly.
Right. That was part of the marketing approach that I was doing.
Yeah.
And I've had those meetings where I'll ask people, I'll say, okay, what's my nickname for my wife? And they know it.
Yeah.
Or what's my dog's name? So, and then you can learn from that. It's like one of the things that we do with our client and prospect list is I do a video every 2 weeks called Coffee with Cuprill. And I shoot it right here in this desk, and Hank, the dog, is right over there, and sometimes he's in it. And we just talk about the current events, things that are new.
Yeah.
And I was blown away by not only the response to that, but like people will say, I didn't get your video this past month. And I'll be like, oh yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just a little slow getting it out, but it's coming.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
So, or they'll submit ideas. Hey, can you answer this question next time?
Yeah.
Sure. So it's just that type of engagement, but that is really critical because, like in my case, I got clients in 20 states. So I need to use video as a way for them to see me and feel like I'm interacting with them, and those types of things. So we do daily emails, we do the podcasts, we do the videos. We send out a monthly sales letter, we send out a quarterly print newsletter. So there's a lot of that stuff. One of the things I talk about when people say, you're asking for what makes an advisor a renegade, there's actually 19 things that we tell them you got to have. And one of them is that you dedicate just as much resources, not necessarily financial, but energy, whatever, to your existing clients as you do trying to generate new one. This assumes that you're fee-based, because they're the ones that are the most profitable people that we do. And that's just one of the things that we're constantly doing. And it's funny thing is, none of that stuff that I just described is really expensive to do. And after you've done it for a while, it doesn't even take very long to do. In fact, if you hire people to help you, they can go faster. But it is incredibly powerful because they appreciate it. They appreciate the fact that you just shot a video about something they saw in the news 2 days ago that bothered them.
Yeah. Well, and from a referral standpoint, and it is amazing, and I'm sure you could parachute into any industry and have the same reaction, but it is amazing even how the understanding of how referrals work among most advisors is so limited. It really feels to me like most of them don't go any further than, who do you know, and try to, get a list at the first meeting.
Which is a really, really annoying thing to do to somebody, is to actually make them feel like their job is to find you referrals. There's a great book by a woman named Stacy Randall Brown, who developed, or it might be Brown Randall, but in any event, on how to get referrals without asking for them. And bottom line, what it comes down to is you find those people who have referred you in the past or who could refer you, and you just heighten your level of contact with them. But never to the point where you're asking for anything, really to the point where you are being so service oriented to them that they can't help but talk about you.
Yeah.
And if they are influential, they'll seek you out. But again, you got to be very organized in how you do it. You just can't do it sporadically.
Yeah.
And as a result of doing that, it just works so well. But you have to, and that's her system essentially. It's like when someone refers to you, these are the 7 things you do, and you're going to do it every single time. So,
well, and the principle built in there is it's much easier to get somebody who referred somebody to you once to refer 10 people.
oh yeah,
To get most of your clients to send you anybody.
Yeah.
And so it's I don't know if it's the 80-20 rule or 90-10, but you probably have 10% that are in positions, or they're just motivated, or they have a relationship, whatever it might be. There's another great book called Giftology, which
yes,
anchors that in as well. Yeah. You send them cookies, you send them flowers.
Yeah.
It's to me, the worst thing to do is try to bribe people into sending you business.
No, yeah, you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But you take giftology, for example. One of the things that I realized was, okay, maybe sending somebody a Cutco knife set sounds expensive because it could be $400.
Yeah.
So that's another justification for charging the planning fee.
Oh, sure.
Right? Because the planning fee pays for that.
Yeah.
If I really wanted to blow them out of the water, I could give them something for $2,500.
Sure.
And still come out even.
Yeah.
So those are those little things that you can do. Like what we do is we give them a 2-knife Cutco knife set, and we put their last name on the blade.
Mm-hmm.
And the beautiful thing about it is there's no handling on us. Basically just go online, send up the order. That's it. Even the thank you card they take care of.
Yeah.
But first of all, that's the best knife they have in their house. Okay. Mm-hmm. And secondly, it's got their name on it. That ain't going anywhere.
Oh yeah.
So, and it's just one of those things. They're like, oh, that was such a nice thing. And I'm like, oh, you gave me a $2,500 check. You don't think I can spend $250 on you?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
There was a time I charged less, and my justification for raising the fee was we were going to give a gift.
Right.
The gift wasn't going to be as much as what we were going to increase the fee to, but so it worked out.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's much easier to show appreciation and then amplify the effect than it is to try to bribe. And
yeah,
I always find the trying to bribe backfires as going all the way back to the beginning of the conversation. There's nothing worse than looking needy. And there's nothing worse than having a client feeling like their responsibility. I was hearing somebody, the insurance pitch is I get compensated 2 ways. I get compensated by to me that just
so tired and old.
And it's like fingernails on a chalkboard.
Well, and it's almost like they feel like they got to come up with some type of a spiel to justify being paid. Where again, I would say to you that if the client or the prospective client doesn't want to pay a fee, then they're not going to want to pay a fee. There's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
So don't try to sugarcoat it. Just say, in fact, if somebody wanted to know where my fees were in relation to others, I without even thinking would say, well, I hope they're among the highest.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I've had even worse. Is I've had people who charge almost as much as I do, and they say, well, why are you charging more? I said, what are they charging? It's time for me to raise my rates. If they're charging, right? But hey, Dan, I overscheduled myself today, and we're about at our time anyway. Hey, I love. I said it before, but I literally have the Dan Cuprill section of my library upstairs.
That's good.
And
I don't think I'll have to sign them and send them back to you.
There you go. I know. I have. Not 50, but a bunch of the ones that you co-authored.
Yep.
Of the pilot book, and didn't you do one for Procter and Gamble?
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Geico employees, and
I've got that one with the little
leaving the lizard,
lizard on front. Yep.
Sure.
As you might guess, I went through everything I could buy on Amazon, everything I could buy on eBay, and then once I met you, I went and bought everything with your name on it. But this is the one for financial advisors, Advisor Architect, and then Renegade Advisor. Mm-hmm. And you do a lot of this stuff done for advisors, which I think is impressive. You have an email system for them.
Right.
We'll co-author a book, not completely authored. They have to do a little bit of work so they can put their name on it.
Right. So make it originally theirs. Exactly.
Yeah. And I always think having your own book is a wonderful referral tool as a pass along. And
very
of course,
powerful.
it's a wonderful credibility tool.
Yeah.
And I appreciate all your feedback on my new book, the Extraordinary Marketing book. There was a lot of time and effort into that.
Oh, it's a great book. I just said you had one person's name in there too much. You need to have yours in there the most. So, but other than that, it's a fabulous book with great information in it.
Yeah.
It's almost, I would actually describe it as encyclopedic because it has a lot of great concepts and theories that makes it an easier reference tool to go to. So it's very well done.
You bet. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure.
I will kill our recording here.